We all know that the inequality of opportunity really is not a new phenomenon. We've lived with these structural injustices for centuries. But it wasn't until the race riots erupted in Watts, Chicago, and Detroit in 1968 that our government began to take some notice. After the riots, President Johnson convened the Kerner Commission to investigate the root causes of the unrest. The Kerner report clearly showed a nation moving towards two societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. While the Kerner report identified the problem, our nation failed to truly address it. There still is not liberty and justice for all. The Kerner report also called for better training for police, new investments in jobs and in housing, and the end of de facto segregation. Now, this report really could have been written last month. Sadly, nearly 50 years later, we still live in a country where the color of your skin and the zip code in which you were born determines your future. But I'm proud to be working with members of the Congressional Black Caucus to continue to address these persistent inequalities in our nation by working on policies and programs to create economic growth, educational opportunities, and job opportunities. For example, we know that black children are disadvantaged from day one. More than 1 in 3 black children are born in poverty. That's 1 in 3. In the world's richest and most powerful nation, a third of all African American children are forced to grow up with the harsh reality of poverty day in and day out. This is outrageous. It's unacceptable. And the cycle of poverty continues in the school systems that institutionalize this discrimination. While black students represent just 18% of preschool enrollment, they account for 42% of preschool student expulsions. Can you believe that? Preschool student expulsions. That's really a disgrace. We're talking about kids ages 2 to 5 years old. These kids don't even get a start, let alone a head start. What in the world are children that young doing being expelled from school? From preschool. Then in high school, the graduation rate for black students is 16 points lower than the rate for their white peers. Black students are far less likely than their white counterparts to obtain a 4-year college degree. And the crisis in inequality extends from education to the economy itself. Over the past 4 decades, the unemployment rate for blacks has remained nearly double the rate for whites. Today, the unemployment rate in the black community stands at 10.1%. That's reported. In context, the current African American unemployment rate is higher than the national average was at the height of the Great Recession. In addition to higher unemployment rates, African Americans are also nearly completely locked out of some key economic sectors, especially the tech sector. Only 1 in 14 technical workers in Silicon Valley is African American or Latino. That's 1 in 14. That's why the CBC has launched the Tech 2020 initiative to work with the tech sector to increase workforce diversity and investments in STEM education and to expand market opportunities for businesses to ensure that the jobs of today and tomorrow are open to all. For African Americans in the workforce, our nation's inequalities are also evident in their paychecks. And Congressman Payne just laid out the statistics for women. While women earn 77 cents on the dollar that a man earns, it's just 64 cents for African American women. The median income for blacks is a mere $34,000. That's nearly $24,000 less than the median income for whites. Most black families hold their wealth in home equity. So the Great Recession hit the black community particularly hard. Too many families lost everything, and many more black families are struggling as home prices fail to keep pace with the stock market. And so, of course, the net worth now of African American families, it's about 6 cents to the dollar for white families. So the time for action is now. These communities, our communities, cannot wait any longer. We must come together like never before to address the inequalities in our nation that leave black families behind. In my role as co-chair of the CBC's Task Force on Poverty and the Economy and chair of the Democratic Whip's Task Force on Poverty, Income Inequality, and Opportunity, we are working very hard to give black families a shot. We're talking about all families, not leaving any family behind. I'm proud to be working with more than 100 of my colleagues to advance policies that build pathways out of poverty into the middle class for everyone, for all Americans. Yes, black lives, like all lives, do count. We've introduced the HAP in 10 Act to develop a national strategy to cut poverty in half in the next decade. This bill would lift more than 22 million Americans out of poverty into the middle class in just the next 10 years by doubling down and coordinating proven anti-poverty programs. The Congressional Black Caucus also took a stand on poverty in its alternative budget proposal. We called for robust investments in education and infrastructure and affordable housing, programs that would ensure opportunity for all. We must keep up this fight until Congress makes these long overdue investments. We need to strengthen the social safety net and invest in proven anti-poverty programs such as the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. These were initiatives begun 50 years ago under President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs, and they are working. We also need to raise the minimum wage and fight for a living wage. That's why we're co-sponsors, and we're very proud to be co-sponsors of H.R. 122, the original Living Wage Act, sponsored by Congressman Al Green, which starts by raising the minimum wage for federal workers and building up to a living wage. And Congressman Bobby Scott's Raise the Wage Act, H.R. 2150, would increase the minimum wage to $12 by 2020. 35 million Americans would benefit this. Also, we wrote a letter signed by 72 colleagues urging the president to adopt a fair chance hiring policy at the federal level for individuals who have been previously incarcerated. A fair chance hiring policy would level the playing field and help stop the cycle of recidivism that's plaguing our communities. This is simply the right thing to do. The federal government should not put up barriers to work for those trying to rebuild their lives after making a mistake and have paid their dues to society. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying tonight, and I think all of us are saying, that we need to give families the opportunity to build wealth and live the American dream. We can end poverty, not just in the African American community, but in the entire United States as a whole. So we've got to keep calling for action. As Dr. King said in his To America speech that he gave on April the 14th, 1968, mind you, at Stanford University, 1968, he said, "We must come to see that social progress never rolls on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and the persistent work of dedicated individuals. We must be those dedicated individuals working for the social progress that is so desperately needed." When you look at the analysis of the economy, job opportunities, educational opportunities in the African American community, we must win this fight because the gaps, the disparities are too great, because only then will America be strong. Because we have to remember that we are a country where everyone is equal under the law. And in fact, when you have communities with such horrible statistics that as we are laying out tonight, such horrible economic and educational gaps, our country is not as strong as it could be. And so we're saying we want liberty and justice for everyone, that all lives matter, including black lives. Thank you again.